It's going to be a football game tonight now. No doubt. It's going to be a football game here. Okay. I done been here before. All right, let's go, baby.
9. Rushing 4, ball comes out of the hands of Newton. It's on the ground, and it's still on the ground. Picked up by T.J. Ward at the 4-yard line. Vaughn Miller did it again.
Alabama back on top of the college football world.
Ladies and gentlemen, football to the max.
Your host, Sean Garmer, Gary Vaughn, and Randy Isbell.
Hello and welcome to another Football to the Max, and this is, of course, another division preview edition. We're wrapping them up. We got the NFC North on this show, and then the NFC East, of course, where our Cowboys play, Gary, and then we're done. And then we're just talking about the preseason and just getting ready for that season. But wait, before we get into anything, in case you have not heard, in case you just don't know, in case you're living under a rock, Randy has his own podcast again. And he's talking some fantasy football, man. That fantasy football to the max is finally out there.
Yeah, thank you. And first episode was a lot of fun, and we'll be back Monday as we start breaking down positions. But Mike and I had a fun discussion today about just draft philosophies and what you should go into your draft expecting.
So Gary, do you have any draft philosophies?
You know what? It just depends on what you're going for. It depends on your league. You know, what do you have? Do you have more receivers? Are you running back heavy? How is the league set up? But, you know, right now, the way I look at it is I always evaluate what are the pressing needs. You know, like let's say you've only got 4 really true, good, hardcore running backs who are going to run most of the time and not splitting too many carries. You may want to take one of those if you have an opportunity. Receivers, you can get plenty of those at times. So I think that's a rare position. But nowadays, I mean, receivers usually drafted number 1.
Yeah, that seems to be the thing right now. And I've kind of gone that route. I've gone that route for a while, and it didn't start working out for me until like the last couple of years. And last year I was like at least in the playoffs for every team I had. I think maybe except one. So I feel good about that decision. I don't know if that's going to work out this year with everybody sort of seeming to be on that bandwagon now, but you never know. You never know. And of course we will be doing fantasy drafts for this league pretty soon here. If not next week. I usually try to go by the rule of thumb of wait until after the third preseason game. You know, usually the last time that they can possibly really get hurt because it's that dress rehearsal game. I mean, obviously, you know, you can get hurt in practice, but that's usually when I wait. And then after that third preseason game, that's when I start firing away at the draft. So, and I've got 4 of them I've got to set up now with the extra WTM league we have this year, but. Yeah, enough about our personal things you don't care about. So, unfortunately, we're not able to... I actually know quite a few Chicago Bears fans. One of them is, of course, Patrick Ketcher that you might hear on this network, but I didn't want to ask him at the last minute. And I had another guy you probably might have heard at some other times, Antonio Pac-Man. He got called into work right when we were about to go do the recording, and he just was never able to get home before we had to start doing the wrestling podcast. So we're gonna have to do the Chicago Bears on our own here, but we do have interviews for the Packers, Lions, and Vikings. Of course, 3 last word on sports guys. So yeah, we'll get to those in a little bit, but we should probably just go ahead and start so we can get out of the way. The Chicago Bears. They get Kevin White back, so basically it's like an extra draft pick they didn't have. And, you know, Alshon Jeffrey is going to be there. So Now, why can't I think of his name? Jeremy Langford, no excuse. He's by himself there at running back, really. Jay Cutler really can't complain about what he's got. I mean, it's his time to really show without Adam Gase there, right? Somebody.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I mean, I believe he's got to prove it and make things happen. And with White coming back, I think it's really important for this team because we saw that Jeffries is definitely a solid number one receiver. But the deal is he didn't have enough around him to really give him the opportunities he could have had last year. And I think White possibly could. Now, we don't know that still because White got injured so quickly last year. So we'll see. But I think there's a great potential there.
Yeah, if healthy, I think Chicago can be a decent team. Not only did White miss the entire season, but Alshon Jeffrey battled with injuries as well. And as Sean pointed out, now this is Jeremy Langford's backfield, him and Kadeem Carey. So we'll kind of see if they set back a little bit. But honestly, I think Langford was just as good as Forte, and he did play well out of the backfield in the passing game as well, which Jay Cutler likes to go with. So here you are again with Chicago with two big threats in the wide receiver position and a decent running back, and we'll kind of see how the defense shapes out. So I don't have the highest expectations for this team as far as record goes. I don't think they will be battling for any kind of division title or anything, but they could surprise, I think. And we talked about it in the fantasy podcast, how I always call the Jacksonville Jaguars the junk time Jaguars. And Chicago could definitely be that, where they could be down a little bit, and all of a sudden Cutler's throwing it all over the yard and racking up the points, and that could turn into wins as well. Because do I believe that Cutler's ever going to lead this team to a good Super Bowl run? No, but he's an okay quarterback, especially when he has two huge targets like he has now. As long as everybody can stay healthy.
Yeah. I mean, they sort of improve. You'd hope they improve the offensive line with drafting Cody Whitehair and some of the guys that they have there. So you'd think there's going to be protection for Jay Cutler. But you mentioned that defense. That was sort of their Achilles heel last year. They went and got Leonard Floyd, Jonathan Bullard to sort of shore up things on the line and rushing wise. I mean, where do you guys think they fit here, just defensive-wise?
I don't know if that they're great at defense right now, just by some of those things you just mentioned. But here's the thing: I think
Trevathan too, from the Bronx.
Yeah, Danny Trevathan. I still look at them, and they've got to prove a lot to me. I think last year they actually kind of surprised me at times. The defense actually stepped up in games that you would have never thought they would have stepped up in. I think they're a scrappy bunch. I think they have, just as much as opportunity as the offense to be good. It's just, will they gel, and can they stay healthy? That's another big thing in this team, and they haven't been able to do it really as of late. But if they can this year, then once again, they could be kind of scrappy.
Yeah, I think they improved, which it wasn't that hard to do. Just looking at some of these stats, I think 12 of the 16 games they gave up at least 20 points, which is not what you expect from a Chicago Bears defense. But to me, as much as it is that they hope the defense improves, I still stick that if they have to stay healthy. I mean, obviously, you go back, you forget that Cutler got hurt as well early on in the season. So they were just riddled with injuries all over the place. So they could be a sneaky team if everyone stays healthy.
Yeah, that's going to be the key. Obviously, healthy. They did add a lot of depth, at least to their linebacking core. I think Leonard Floyd is going to wind up moving over to the DN, so it adds depth there too. I think it's all about the secondary. If they can sort of not make it to where Cutler has to outscore everyone. Robbie Gould obviously not missing field goals. That's also a key that he had problems with last year, especially towards the end of the season. And, being in this division, that's no cupcake of a division. I mean, the other three teams that are in this are certainly going to be contenders for playoffs, if not right there as far as in the mix. This could easily be a division where, again, just like last year, everybody beats up everybody and we're waiting until like the end. Or it could be one where just one team runs away with it or anything. So this is one of those weird divisions. You don't know what you're going to get necessarily because I don't think that the Vikings and Packers sort of have separation from the other two a little bit. But, these teams have been around each other, since the 20s. They all know each other. They know what they're going to do. I don't know. I don't think this is so cut and dry sometimes with this thing. But looking at the Bears, sort of their schedule and all that, I mean, where are you thinking for the Bears? Just, I guess, record-wise or their spot?
I mean, they could. I mean, they were 6-10 last year with all these injuries. I would not be surprised to see them flirt with that 500 mark and go 8-8. That's probably where I'd put them, is 8-8.
What do you think?
Yeah, 8-8's a good number. I think I'm going to go a little less, though. I'm still not sold that they're going to be able to do some of the things they need to do to be just a better team. I'm going to go. I think I'm going to go a little bit below 7-9. I think that's the best they can probably do.
Yeah, I'll say. We apparently lost Randy here. Gotta love when Skype does things like this.
Oh, I know.
At least we're not recording video and we lose you. Then we lose That's the worst part, too.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm gonna say. Yeah, I'm gonna say 7-9 for them too. But all right. Now that apparently we got Randy and we lost him again. Let's go ahead and get on to our first interview here. David McCaffery, last word on sports writer for the Detroit Lions. He has plenty to say here in our longest interview, about 20 minutes. Here's David McCaffery. Hello, and I'm here with David McCaffery from Last Word on Sports, the writer for the Detroit Lions. You living in Canada. You live close, obviously, with the Lions. How is that with football over there?
Well, it's actually football is very, very big in Canada overall, but especially in my hometown. We're just right across the border. Ford Field is about 10 or so minutes from my house, so it's a very Americanized city in Canada, of course, and the NFL is absolutely huge here. Huge.
I mean, is there a lot of CFL fans in Canada, or just kind of it's either you like one or the other?
Well, I mean, I'm not going to lie. I myself don't follow the CFL really at all. There are fans. I think it depends on what city you go to, but certainly here in Windsor, with Detroit being so close by, mostly we're into the NFL here. I mean, we're not all Lions fans, but by and large, this is very much a Detroit town. So the NFL is big in Canada, for sure. The CFL is as well, but where I live, it's pretty much all NFL all the time.
So is that sort of why you became a Lions fan, just from living so close?
Yeah, I mean, proximity certainly plays a part in that. Really, it wasn't always my own choice. My dad was a huge sports fan. He followed every NFL, NHL, all the stuff you can think of. It was his life pretty much. And, he pretty much indoctrinated me as a young person into being a sports fan. So I pretty much liked all the same teams as he did. He's a lifelong Lions fan. He was fortunate enough to actually see them win a championship in '57, which, of course, I did not. So I'm waiting on that still, but I'm looking forward to seeing them this year for sure.
All right. I mean, the Lions sort of, they had a very nice offseason, one that maybe you had a loss that obviously big deal with Calvin Johnson. How did you feel about that? Did you feel that he was going to be retired when he said it, or did you have this feeling that maybe he'll come back?
Well, that's a really good question, and I think my first thought process was that he means this for real. I've been watching Calvin his whole career. I absolutely love Calvin Johnson, one of my all-time favorite players, and he's not a guy who's going to say things he doesn't usually mean. He follows through on what he says. So there was a lot of lead up to the moment he actually retired. It was very, very, very upsetting for us locally because we kind of see it coming. But I did believe him. I still do believe him. I don't think he's coming back. I'm not going to lie. I wish he would. But I understand that injuries mounted, and it's a tough game. It's a physical game, and I cannot blame the guy at all for retiring on top. He had a fantastic career. He did right by us as fans and as a community. It's tough to see him go. I actually wrote a piece about Calvin for Last Word on Sports right after he retired. And it was tough. It was emotional for all of us. Like, players like Calvin, they're generational talents, right? He meant a lot to the game and a lot to the city. And it's tough to see him go, but we all wish him the best. And I think, if you had to ask me right now, I think he's staying retired. I really think he is. So it's tough to see, but I respect the man for what he did, absolutely.
So, I mean, in trying to sort of what you can do to replace him, because replacing a talent like that is extremely difficult, but you bring in a Marvin Jones from the Bengals, you bring in some other pieces in Andre Caldwell, you draft Chase Billingsley, you go get Andre Roberts. I mean, I watched that preseason game, and I thought overall, obviously you're playing against scrubs on the other side, so it's very hard to kind of judge sometimes, but I thought that for the most part, the offense looked good. I mean, what is the feeling kind of in camp, and how the receivers are kind of getting along with Matthew Stafford?
Well, that's I think what we've done in this offseason is the team has assembled a really solid receiving core. Like you mentioned a minute ago, you just can't replace Calvin Johnson. Guys like that just don't come around, But I like what they've done overall. You still have Golden Tate back, who is a very, very good player, sticky hands, great after the catch, all around. The Marvin Jones signing, he brings a different element to the team. He gets vertical pretty well. He's a very good player. I think you've seen him kind of competing for targets in Cincinnati behind A.J. Green and Eifert and all those guys. So I think he's going to show some really good things this year. I love the Anquan Bolden signing. I think that was a fantastic move to get a guy like that in camp with all the experience and grit and leadership. I think at 35, 36 years old, he still has all kinds of talent and all kinds of heart for the game. So I feel like they've built a very solid and deep receiving core. You don't have that, true number one superstar Calvin Johnson, Julio Jones type of guy in camp, but you have a very, very solid core. And I think that Matthew Stafford is poised to have a solid season, I think. I think he has a great relationship with offensive coordinator Jim Bob Cooter, who came in and did some really good things last year. Stafford played really efficiently second half last year. Was quietly one of the best quarterbacks in the league down the stretch last year. So I think that if that can all transition into this year, some continuity organizationally speaking, getting Jones involved, getting Tate, keeping him going, getting Anquan Bolden in the mix, like you said, Andre Roberts in the mix, all these guys, there is a pretty solid receiving core in Detroit. Now, there's no elite guy, but they're in pretty good shape, I think.
Oh, I mean, the Anquan Bolden one was huge, I think, because not only does he was still a very good receiver when he was with the 49ers, and
Absolutely.
I think in size, he's the biggest guy that they got as far as what Calvin Johnson brought, but I think just being a veteran is big for these guys that are
It
here.
is big. It is big. And you know what? There's a lot of young guys on the team, and having a presence like Anquan Bolden in the locker room, it speaks volumes. It's a fantastic move.
I mean, talk about, the running back situation here for the Lions is sort of a one. You have an Amir Abdullah, who's not your typical sort of running back, and then you kind of have guys kind of behind him they kind of always had this by committee approach. Is this kind of what they're doing this year too?
I think so, honestly. I think that very similar to what we said about the wide receiving core, where we don't have one guy who does it all. We have a lot of guys who have different roles. The running back core, even more so. I think that Amir Abdullah is a very talented guy. He's a spark score wonder, absolutely. He's got all kinds of ability. Like you said, not your prototypical three-down back, right? He has a lot of talent. Behind him, you have guys like Theo Riddick, who last year emerged as one of the game's best pass-catching backs, I think. You still have Zach Zenner in camp, who was a preseason kind of phenomenon last year. Got hurt early in the season, didn't contribute too much, obviously, but he had a lot of upside. You bring in a guy like Stephen Ridley, who has a lot of experience. You know, he played very well in New England. He didn't do much last year in New York, but he was injured coming off an ACL tear, right? So you have a lot of different guys who do a lot of different things who are going to contribute. I think that you're going to see, like you said, Amir Abdullah as the lead back, but certainly there's a lot of roles to be filled by a lot of different players. So you're not going to see, I don't think you're going to see a 1,000-yard rusher this year. I could be wrong, but I think you're going to see a lot of guys take on a lot of different roles for this running back core.
So last year during the middle season, they changed offensive coordinator, brought in Jim Bob Cooter, and then you kind of sort of saw the offense change and get better as the season went on. Obviously, they were so deep in the hole, it was going to be very hard for them to kind of overcome that. Now that they have the fresh slate, what are they sort of looking to bring to the offense that hasn't been there in years past for Matthew Stafford and everybody?
I think a key is consistency. I think with the Lions offense in the last, let's say 5 years or so, there will be weeks where the Lions offense looks like one of the game's elite. Mm-hmm. And there'll be weeks where the ball just is not moving very much at all down the field. I think that, there are a lot of talented guys on this team, and there's a lot of heart on this team, but I think that most people would agree the offense has been up and down over the years. I think Matt Stafford is a very good quarterback with a ton of talent. I think you've seen a lot of times where, he'd have great games and some tough games, and I think that this year is all about consistency and efficiency. I think, last year he set highs across the board as far as his completion percentage. I think this year they're going to do a lot more short passing, low percentage passing. High percentage passing. You're not going to see the same amount of gunslinging down the field stuff as you usually see. They're going to throw the ball plenty. They always do. We always have in Detroit in the last decade or so. But I think you're going to see an emphasis on the shorter intermediate passing game in an attempt to remain efficient. I think you're going to see a lot of running this year as well, but at the end of the day, this is a passing team. We have what I would call a franchise quarterback, and that's not going to change too much, Calvin or no Calvin, right?
Right. So, the offensive line, they went and drafted Taylor Decker. That was sort of a problem for them last season with it seemed like there was times where Stafford would step back and there's already a guy in his face.
Yeah.
Do you feel like they've improved that this year where he can feel like he has more protection?
I feel like they've made improvements to the offensive line, but I don't know that we're going to see those improvements reflected necessarily early in this year. I think, the first preseason game against Pittsburgh, Matt Stafford was hit a lot, hurried a lot, under a lot of pressure. You're adding a lot of young guys to the equation. Taylor Decker, I think, is going to be a very good player, but, rookie offensive linemen struggle very often. I think that, you saw Swanson still playing center in the preseason. They may transition to Graham Glasgow at some point. I don't really know at what point. Riley Reif's now on the right side, and it seems like they've been trying to move Riley to the right side for the better part of the last 3 years. They've never really wanted him on the left side, it seems like. So he's playing a new position as well. I think that getting some continuity along that offensive line is going to be key this year because as of right now, there are going to be a lot of bumps in the road. And I do think over the long term, yes, they have definitely improved that offensive line. But I think in the immediate future, it's going to be tough. I think that first preseason game was scary. Stafford only played one drive, and he was being harassed the whole time. And I think if they can get those guys to gel and mesh together, they'll be just fine. But until they do, it's going to be pretty tough in the early going of the season, I think.
Defensively, the Lions have been missing one of their big key components in DeAndre Levy for quite some time now, and there's still talk about people worry that he may not play again for the Lions at all. And then you talk to the Lions, and they're saying, okay, he's good for the season. What are you hearing? What do you think about DeAndre Levy?
I think DeAndre's going to be okay. I think he's going to be okay this year. I think it's been a scary year of nail-biting and hand-wringing about him because, you saw, like you just said last year, not having him on the field in the same year when they lost Ndamukong Suh, the defense struggled quite a bit. Now they kind of righted the ship towards the end of the season, but a player that important, a guy that vital to team success, having him sidelined is a very bad thing. I suspect he's going to come back at full strength this year. From what I'm hearing, what I've been seeing, that's the expectation locally anyway. But you have to get him up and going this year because he's just too crucial a part of that team's defense, too crucial a part of what we want to do on that side of the football. with him missing games, that's very much your leader on defense now, right? So having him out of the mix is a huge loss for the team, and they got to get him up there and get him going as fast as possible.
And as far as the sort of pieces on the defense that you drafted, that I don't know if they're going to plug and play now, or they're going to be sort of guys you sub in. But what do you feel that A'Shawn Robinson and Miles Killebrew could bring to the team?
I think you're going to see A'Shawn step into a rotational defensive line role. I don't think you're going to see him necessarily start right away. It could happen. I think that there are going to be some growing pains for him as well. I think for Killebrew, I think you could very easily see him playing quite a bit this year. I think that he brings an element to the team they've been lacking and they need, and I believe that he has the kind of competitive fire and spirit to carve out a role for himself. Our secondary has always been a little bit hit or miss, and I think, you've got Darius Slay locked in. They just signed him to a new contract, and I think that was a very wise move. He's improved every year in the NFL. I think Glover Quinn is certainly a great player, veteran presence definitely. But I think beyond that, you have a lot of questions in the secondary. So I think you're going to see guys like Killebrew find a lot of playing time this year. I don't think it's going to be immediately. I think you're not going to see, beyond Taylor Decker, you're probably not going to have a whole lot of rookies making gigantic contributions right off the bat. But I do see these guys being eased in, and I do expect A'Shawn Robinson in particular to play quite a bit right off the bat.
All right, so we move into, obviously, first preseason game already played. Any kind of thoughts you sort of took out of that? I mean, again, it's preseason, but...
Yeah, I mean, I think that the thing is, being a Lions fan, being a Lions writer, being around this city, this town wants a winner. They're desperate to see this football team succeed. We've been teased a couple times with playoff berths, but it's been a while since things have really been good. So we have a tendency in the Detroit area to probably overreact a bit to preseason success. And I always go back to, the year we went 0-16, we had a 4-0 preseason, right? So it's hard to read too much into it. What I will say is the Pittsburgh Steelers had a lot of guys, key players, out of that game. Ben didn't play. Le'Veon Bell isn't playing. Antonio Brown didn't play. So I don't want to read too much into it. What I would say is the offensive line, like I said before, did struggle to protect Stafford, but I expect that to improve at some point. The offense did move the ball pretty well. I think that the passing game looks fairly sharp. I think that, we didn't see Amir Abdullah play, but I think that we have running backs who can contribute. Our defense did look good, but again, they were playing against backups. So it's hard to say. What I read into it is that this team does look motivated and hungry, and I do think that they're going to play at a reasonably high level this year. It's a tough division, obviously, but I do anticipate this team, being very hungry this season. So I think that I was impressed overall, but I don't want to overreact to, the first week of the preseason, right?
Right. So looking at the schedule with, your division that you're in with at least two very, very good teams, and, we don't know what the Bears are really going to be until they start playing.
True.
What do you feel with the schedule you have and just with the division you're in? How do you think they're going to be doing?
Well, it's tough to say in the NFC North. As you alluded to before, there are two extremely good teams in this division. I think that the Green Bay Packers are going to bounce back that offense, having Jordy back, having Eddie Lacy get into shape. Aaron Rodgers is still Aaron Rodgers, right? He's not going to be changing anytime soon. The Minnesota Vikings are quite possibly one of the league's most underrated teams. They have so much talent. They have a fantastic coach. They have a good defense. I think if Teddy Bridgewater takes a step forward this year, they're going to be a very, very competitive football team, as they already were last year, of course. The Bears are a wild card, but I feel like they had a solid offseason too. They could do well this year, and I think John Fox is a very good coach. I see us. I sort of feel like the Lions are going to have, I don't want to say a year where they regress too much because I believe the future is bright. I think we have the right people in place. I think that Bob Quinn was a good hire. I think that we have some good coaches on the staff that are underrated. Terrell Austin's fantastic. I expect the Lions to be a competitive team and play every team they play tough this year, but it's hard to envision finishing any better this year than third place at best in the NFC North. It's just too good of a division.
Yeah, so you're saying So what do you think is a best case and a worst case scenario for you then?
As far as record goes, or?
Yeah, what do you think is the best they're gonna do? I guess you could see them doing, and you kind of already sort of gave me your worst that you think that they won't do any worse than third. But
I think,
how are you feeling?
I feel like this is a year where you're going to have Green Bay and Minnesota fighting for the division again. So I think the Lions this year, I think in a best case scenario, are a 500 team. I think that their schedule isn't horrid, but there are some tough teams. And once again, you're starting out with 6 games in your own division, right? Which, like you said, they're playing, in Green Bay, in Soldier Field. Those are tough games. So I think in a best case scenario, the Lions probably can go 8-8. I don't see them making a deep run this year. I don't see playoffs necessarily. I think in a year or two down the line, they will be in the mix again. But I think we're looking at best case scenario 8-8, worst case scenario, I'm going to say 6-10.
All right, so I got to make you choose here. Give me those standings 1 to 4.
1 to 4. Okay, that's a good one. I'm going to say that the Green Bay Packers take the division again this year. I think that Minnesota is very much in the mix, but I expect Green Bay's offense in particular to just really have a really good year. I think Jordy Nelson was just activated off the PUP list. I think that Eddie Lacy looks really motivated and hungry this year. I think that Aaron Rodgers will bounce back for sure. So I'm going to go Green Bay, number 1. I have to go Minnesota, number 2, for the simple reason that that team has assembled a ton of talent. They have a good plan in place. They play very, hard-nosed, blue-collar football. They run the ball well. They play good defense. I think Teddy Bridgewater, like I said, is underrated and is still developing. So I give them the second slot. I'm going to say we're going to finish third for the simple reason that I do think there's enough talent on this team and enough continuity to, stay in the mix. It's tough to put the Bears in fourth because I think the Bears are actually going to surprise some people this year. And I have nothing but respect for that coaching staff and that team. I think Jay Cutler gets a worse rap than he deserves. So this is no slight to the Bears. I believe they will have a solid season, but I'm going to say 1 through 4, Green Bay, Minnesota, Detroit, Chicago.
All right. Who do you think is somebody that on the Lions that could sort of surprise us and nobody's talking about right now that you're going, oh man, didn't think he was going to have be a big part of the Lions?
You know what? That's a really good question, and I'm going to have to go with Devin Taylor. Devin Taylor has had some success in his career as a rotational end, but hasn't had a whole lot of opportunity. He's shown a good knack for being a pass rusher in the past, but has never really had a solid role carved out. You're looking at a situation this year where he's going to play a lot. He's going to probably start, and I think that he will surprise people. It'll be very easy to say, Ziggy Ansah or Darius Slay, who already have proven to be good players on the defense, but I think Devin Taylor will surprise some people this year. He will, I think, have a pretty high sack total.
All right, David. I think you've answered all of our questions here. I want to say thank you for helping us out, man.
No problem. Thank you for having me. I really appreciated it.
Well, we appreciate having you, and hopefully, we can have you on again during the season to talk.
I would love that. Absolutely.
I almost hit the wrong stop button there. We would have stopped the whole show. But anyway, that was Last Word on Sports writer David McCaffery talking Lions. Thought he gave a pretty fair assessment of the team, saying 8-8. I mean, is that kind of where you see the Lions too?
Yeah, I just have to say, David was awesome as a guest there. He really nailed the Lions kind of the way I see it too, where mediocre is kind of the way you could call them. We'll see kind of how the no Calvin Johnson deal will affect them. But I'm with him. I like the Anquan Bolden pickup, and Golden Tate is still very good. Marvin Jones could be right in the mix as far as a great receiver there too. So I think they still have weapons. But to me, there's two big issues on this team, and the defense still is a struggle. And when you're playing a schedule like the Lions do, where of course you're playing in the NFC North, where the offenses are pretty good, you're playing the NFC East, whose most of their offenses are pretty good, and you're playing the AFC South, which all of those offenses are really good, the defense is going to be a hindrance for them. The second was, and you guys had brought it up, was the offensive line issues. And for the most part, it's because of how just lackluster they are on the run game because of it and become so one-dimensional. Gary, I'll ask you this trivia question. When was the last time a Lions running back rushed for over 100 yards? Bonus points if you could. Bonus points if you can name the runner.
Okay, jeez. Okay, so I'll say. Oh man. Okay, I'm gonna guess 2007. And runner, I would have to think about that because I don't even know at the moment. I'm trying to think of the Lions runners of 2007. I don't know. Where are we going here?
You have a guess there, Sean?
2007?
Yeah, Gary went a bit far.
Okay, 2000. I'll say 2012.
2013? That's where I'll say 2013.
Can you name the runner?
God. Joique Bell?
He was on that team, but Reggie Bush in 2013.
You know what? I was seriously going to say Reggie Bush, then I was like, oh, no, it would be the other guy.
Was the last 100-yard rusher for the Detroit Lions. Now, I understand there's committees and stuff, but last year, the highest rushing total by one rusher for the Lions was 77 yards. So they're not even, hinting at a 100-yard rusher. You can't be that one-dimensional in the NFL, and that worries me. I think they have a lot of talent, and I'm a big Matt Stafford fan. I think he has a lot of talent, and I don't think he gets the respect he deserves. But it's all on him and that passing game, and you just can't do that in the NFL.
That's why I kind of sitting here guessing myself, because I was like, man, they really don't run the ball. They really don't have guys who just really do that full time, and it's obvious in the running back situation. They haven't, really focused on that in years past. So that's why I was kind of dumbfounded. But yeah, this is a situation where I don't really know that they're still going to do it this year. I mean, really, they're still going to try to find ways to get the ball out of Matt Stafford's hands, and they become one-dimensional, which puts them in trouble because they don't have exactly the best talent up front, protection-wise, and they don't have the balance of running back that they need, so people just tee off on them all the time, and that's a problem.
Yeah, that is a problem, and like I said, in that interview, I think offensive line is a big issue in that, Stafford can't run around and hope that. Now, the thing is that they improved him on a lot, and you saw in the preseason game as well. He will take off. He will run if he has to, and I think he can he can get around the whole thing with the offensive line with the running ability, but you can't do that every play. He's going to have time to be able to sit back there a little bit and throw to somebody. And at least he does have what they've been talking about in camp, where he has some chemistry with Marvin Jones now. So if that continues to pick up for him, at least Marvin Jones is going to be proved to be somebody solid. I still think, like you guys, though, it's that 8-8, 9-7. I'll give them 9 and I'll say 9-7 for the Lions, but I think that's probably as high as they go there.
I don't even give them that much credit. I'm looking more at the 6-10, 7-9 range.
Yeah, I'm once I look at this thing, I kind of think to myself that, you know what, I may be a little bit more generous. I'm going to give them 8-8.
All right, fair enough. So we just got the two big teams left that many are thinking are, if not playoff bound, close to it. Let's start off with last word on sports writer Michael Crow for the Minnesota Vikings. Hello, and I am here with Michael Crow, last word on sports writer for the Minnesota Vikings. How are you doing today?
Oh, I'm doing great. How about you?
Doing all right. So, you always been a Vikings fan?
Yep, pretty much born and raised here in Minnesota as a Vikings fan, so been at it for quite a while.
Yeah, it's always like to hear people's stories. Some people it comes from birth, some it's like later on in life. So it's
Yep.
That's kind of how I am with the Cowboys, just born and raised, and I don't even live in Dallas, but of course people got to be apparently to some people, if you don't live in the state where you're a fan of, you're apparently not a real fan anymore somehow. But
Yeah, they're probably getting a little less that way with the internet, but
yeah. So the Vikings, interesting season they had last year, sad ending. Realizing they probably don't have to change a whole lot going into this season to improve. What do you think of their offseason and what they did in the draft?
well, they didn't make any real big moves. I guess the big one probably from our standpoint is the Alex Boone signing, just because probably the biggest glaring problem with the team was the offense, and the biggest glaring problem with the offense was the offensive line. And he brings some stability there to the offensive line and right up the middle there. So I think they're pretty happy with that, and I think that Alex Boone's going to add some toughness to the line there with Matt Khalil, who's been kind of, depending on who you talk to, which fans you talk to, they think he's kind of soft. So that would be the biggest thing, and then the next biggest thing after that would probably be the draft, and they got Laquan Treadwell. He needed to upgrade the weapons for Teddy, and they did that with him. So I guess that would be the two biggest things that they did in the off season.
A lot was made of Teddy Bridgewater from last season coming into this season. Do you feel like he's ready to take that next step?
Yeah, I'm actually currently right now in the middle of writing a new piece here for the Last Word on Sports Network, and it's featuring Teddy Bridgewater and how we compare him to maybe some other of the top quarterbacks at this stage in their careers. And I think the one thing that people have to keep in mind is that Teddy Bridgewater is about a year younger than most of the guys that are coming into the league out of the draft, because he was I think he was only 23 going into this year. So he's going into his third year. He's only 23. And he'll be 24, I think, later in the season. But so far, I think everybody's fairly happy. I think he's done pretty well considering he's so young, and he just doesn't make a lot of mistakes. He doesn't make a lot of big plays, and I think the big plays is what they're trying to get more out of him this year. And so far this preseason, he's shown that he can throw the deep ball a lot better, so they've been working on that quite a bit. As far as projections go, he's kind of hard to put one on because he's a fairly conservative quarterback, and they've been kind of conservative with playing the call plays. So it just depends on what they decide to do with the offense. But I think they're going to be trying to throw down the field a lot more this year. So far, that's what we've been seeing in the preseason.
I mean, Adrian Peterson obviously showed he still got it pretty much last year. All indications they're assuming he's going to do the same thing this year?
Yeah, you would figure at some point he's going to slow down. He's into his 30s now, and I think you could tell a little bit that he wasn't quite the second and third year Adrian Peterson last year. He just doesn't quite have that finishing speed that he had earlier in his career, but he's still got the vision and the ability to make the cuts, and he's got more than enough breakaway speed to break big runs still. But I think in the next couple of years, I think we're going to start seeing a significant drop-off in his production, and it could start with this year, just partially because I think they're going to actually be putting more of the offense on Teddy this year, and they're also going to be depending a lot more on Jerick McKinnon to play a bigger role in the offense. He'll be the primary third down guy, and he's probably going to be getting more carries as well. So I think Peterson's load is going to probably be a little bit less this year.
I mean, the receiver core, obviously, like you said, upgraded with Laquan Treadwell, but you kind of have, it's still sort of a mixed bag there. You got Stephon Diggs and Treadwell, and then kind of just, it's sort of a unknown thing with everybody else.
Yeah, I think as far as the rest of the offense goes, especially the wide receivers, because I think last year was a little bit of a strange year because Charles Johnson, who in 2014 kind of had a little bit of a breakout year in 2014. Last year he was apparently dealing with broken ribs for a good chunk of the season, and he just wasn't himself all year last year. And now coming back to preseason, he's looked very good, and he's got really good chemistry with Bridgewater again. And Stephon Diggs, he's not many people seem to know a whole lot about him, but he's got great runs great routes, and he's been almost uncoverable to the cornerbacks for the Vikings so far in the preseason practices. So I think those two are actually going to end up being pretty solid targets for Bridgewater this year. And then you have Laquan Treadwell, and he's been doing pretty good in preseason as well. And but Mike Zimmer just doesn't put a lot of responsibility in the hands of rookies, so I wouldn't expect him to take a big prominent role with the Vikings this year unless he gets out there and really blows the doors off the place when he gets out there. And then they have Cordero Patterson, who's got all the athletic ability to do all the things you need from a wide receiver in the NFL, except for he doesn't have the work ethic. But this year, apparently, he's been working a little bit harder on studying the game and practicing his routes and all of that sort of stuff. And so far, so good with that. I guess he's a little bit better looking than he was last year from a route running perspective, but I still don't know what to expect from him this year other than some kick returns.
I mean, the defense is, you got a younger defense and just a bunch of guys that came together, and they were one of the best in the league last year. You were able to keep a lot of these guys, kind of give them extensions or sort of re-sign them. Are you really feeling like this could be one of the top-tier defenses this year?
Yeah, I think actually last year it was already, in that top tier, and I think they got better this year. I think the thing to look at here is that they're going to have quite a bit of depth now. That's where they mainly improved their defense this year, is by adding depth to the line. They had pretty good depth last year. It's better this year. Right now they're showing Brian Robinson as a starting left end, but he also has Danielle Hunter right behind him. And last year he had 6 sacks as in a backup role. This year he's going to actually see quite a bit more time at that left end spot. And Brian Robinson is going to actually move inside and play tackle at times. So they're going to be getting him in there more because he's pretty much a pass rush specialist. He's not the greatest against run, but in pass situations, he can really do some damage. They also have, on the defensive tackles, is probably the strength of the defense with Sherry Floyd when he's healthy, and that's been his problem. And then back behind him, we have Tom Johnson, and he could be starting on a lot of teams in the NFL. Probably more than half of the teams would be happy to have him as their starting tackle. And Linval Joseph has been basically a beast ever since he got here at tackle. So, and Shamar Stephen, solid backup, and another guy to look at here. Maybe in the future is Zach Moore. He's a third-string defensive end, but he's been looking pretty good in preseason. I think he's got some talent here, and he might not be too long before he's a starter. So.
Hey, so the Vikings had their first preseason game, and they're technically playing their second one right now. Anything you kind of took out of that? Was there anything to take out of that game for you?
Yeah, the first game preseason and first and fourth games of the preseason are kind of hard to take a whole lot from, but I think you saw a little bit of what they've been working on with Teddy Bridgewater in that one. connected on a nice 50-yard pass and catch to Charles Johnson in that one. And I think that's kind of what they've been working on with him a lot this year, trying to, get him to be able to throw that downfield pass a lot better, and it showed up in that game. So I think that's about the biggest thing I could take away from that game. I mean, there's a lot of, back end of the roster, positioning going on in that game, but first preseason game, they're just kind of getting everybody's feet wet. So I guess that would be my biggest take from that.
I mean, looking at moving ahead here to the actual season, looking ahead at the schedule you have, obviously the division you're in with two tough teams, or at least one that's always a bugger team for you guys in the Packers. I mean, where do you see the Vikings this year? What do you think is a best case scenario for them? And what do you think is maybe the worst that they might do?
Well, with the record-wise, I think it's going to be a tricky season to predict the record, just because I think the Bears got better. The Packers are always tough. So I think it's going to be kind of, we're going to be eating each other up, I think, in our division this year. So we may end up having a season where we have a record the same as last year, but the team was a lot better. But I think best case scenario, maybe they win 12 games. Worst case, you never know what the worst case can be, because you lose Teddy Bridgewater, and we have basically one of the worst quarterbacks in the entire league starting for us. So we don't have any depth at quarterback, so that could be the real nail in the coffin for the season if something happened to Teddy Bridgewater. But as far as the division standings go, I think it would be, the Vikings should be the favorite going in, just because they won last year and they improved coming into this year. But it could be any of the three, Bears, Packers, or Vikings, could end up taking that division. So it should be pretty interesting this year.
Well, I got to put you on the spot. Give me the standings for you, 1 to 4.
The standings, 1 to 4. Well, I'm going to have to put the Vikings first, just because I think that they were the best team at the end of last year, and they did improve. And I would still have to put the Packers second, because they have the best quarterback in the division. So usually if you have the best quarterback in the division, I don't see how you can do worse than second place in the division. The third place, and mainly just because I'm not a big fan of Cutler, I think that's where the Bears are always going to, have their governor set, is with their quarterback. So I think this year 3, but it's the NFL, and who knows what could happen. Any of the 3 could end up walking off with it this year. So, and of course, Lions at last, but that wouldn't be any surprise to anybody. So.
So you really think that the Lions are that bad? I guess they're going to be.
I don't think they're the 0-16 variety that we've seen in the past, but they're definitely not going to be very good this year. If they won 6 games, that would be pretty outstanding, I think. So.
What is a player you think not a lot of people are talking about, but maybe we need to watch out for on the Vikings?
I think probably Jaron Kearse. He's the nephew of Javon Kearse, the great pass rusher. He plays safety for the Vikings. He's a big guy for safety. I think he's about 6'4", the 220 range. And I think the Vikings ended up getting him in like the 7th round. But he's looked pretty outstanding in the preseason so far. He's just big and rangy. And I think the guy that they were trying to get in the off season to put on the opposite side of Harrison Smith, George Iloka. You look at Kearse and Iloka, the size and athletic ability and everything matches up. Like, they couldn't get him, so they drafted Kearse on kind of a flyer just to see what they had there, and he's looking pretty good. I'm pretty sure he'll be a starter for the Vikings here within the next year or two. So.
All right. Michael, you've answered all of our questions here, so I want to say thank you for helping us out.
No problem, Sean. Anytime.
All right. All right. That was Michael Crow talking Minnesota Vikings. Last word on Sports Matter. Well, he definitely had the same thought we had about the Lions. So, Vikings, are you having them wild card, or are you having them win in this division?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm looking at it as a wild card possibly because I just think they got a lot of talent. I think they got a lot of things that they can put in place. If it all falls into place right, I think they could definitely make a run here. Adrian Peterson every year, he's a guy that's a veteran. He always works hard. He's getting older, but he's still a horse. I think Teddy Bridgewater, he may not be one of the elite quarterbacks in this league, but I think he has enough with these receivers that he has at his own display. And I think that he can make things happen when it really needs to take place. It just depends on, once again, like we talked about with the Lions, how is the offensive line going to work? How are they going to take care? And I think this offensive line is built a little bit better to take care of Teddy Bridgewater. I think the defense last year also showed some things, and I think that this year, if they can come in healthy, they can kind of do what they did last year. And so I think, really, honestly, this is a team that is built to get to the wild card. I won't speak for any further than that, but I think they definitely are a wild card type team.
Yeah, I definitely see them as the second place team in this division, battling it out for one of those wild card teams. But just looking at last year's schedule and just kind of remembering, I know like everyone is saying they're not getting the respect they deserve, and I understand that. They're a very good team. They're a very solid team. I'm a fan of Bridgewater. I think he has been steadily improving as a quarterback. Of course, you have Peterson there, and they have some nice weapons on the offense on top of a pretty good defense. But when you look at last year, anytime they played a good team, except for Week 17 when they upset Green Bay on the road, they lost. Most of their wins last year came on mediocre to bad teams, except for, I guess, you can give them the win against Kansas City Week 6. That's a good team. But they lost to Denver, they lost to Green Bay, they lost to Seattle, and they lost to Arizona. Every time they were up there with that top echelon, those playoff teams, they couldn't get it done. Now, they should have beat Seattle in the wild card game, but a shanked field goal that, cost them there in that crazy below freezing game. But I just think that's where they are. They're good, but when you put them up against tough competition, they're not that good. They're not that top elite level that I think a lot of people want to put them at yet.
I can totally see what you're saying there, Randy. It's very true if you look at their schedule last year, whatever, but it's a little bit of a different team from last year as far as Bridgewater's a year older. That also means Peterson's a year older, so, you don't know if he's going to hit that wall yet or not, but, your receiver core improves. Yeah, you're still relying on a lot of younger talent here, but I think regardless of what he says about Mike Zimmer's not going to put a lot on the rookie or whatever, Treadwell starts playing well, he's going to be playing a lot more. He's going to be starting. And if Charles Johnson actually shows up the way he didn't last year, that's another guy you really weren't counting on, because last year was Stephon Diggs and pretty much that's it, and Kyle Rudolph. And that's his only two targets. And if the offensive line improved, that's a big thing that hurt Bridgewater a lot. Was that a lot of times, if they sent a blitz, the offensive line didn't know what to do with it, and he'd get sacked. Or if he was given time, he knew where to put the ball. It's all about, did they improve enough to make that next step? I think in certain ways they did. The defenses, they kept almost all the core guys. They're going to be just as good, if not as great as last year. I wanted to do it, but I'm kind of in that state where You gotta prove it to me first. I think they'll be right there neck and neck with the Packers the whole time. And I'm gonna say 10-6 for the Vikings to get the wild card. So we move on to the last team here that we have not talked about. The Green Bay Packers, who get back some key, or a key player that was missing for the entirety of last season. Hello, and I am here with Last Run of Sports Writer for the Green Bay Packers, Fred Thurston. How are you doing?
I'm good. Thanks for having me on.
Well, thank you for being on with us here. So, looking at, the Packers sort of did their normal thing in the offseason, kind of just stayed quiet. They had the draft. Not a whole lot of noteworthy that I remember just totally coming out of it. What did you think about what they decided to do with who they got in the draft and just thought their offseason?
Well, you kind of nailed it. The offseason was a typical Green Bay Packer offseason. A million names flying around and none of them coming. Jared Cook was our big acquisition, which was pretty exciting. He had some injury coming right off of it, so it'll be interesting to see him come onto the team and see what he can, bring to the passing game that, lacked a threat at tight end. As good as Richard Rodgers is, I think Jared Cook brings that versatility and that deep ball kind of tight end gameplay. And as for the draft, again, it wasn't anything, as I like to say, there's no sexy picks. There was no picks that blew anyone's minds. There was no picks that, were like, oh my gosh, I got to go get his jersey tomorrow. That's the hottest thing right now. But what we did and what Ted did, what Ted always does, is he drafts very, very well and for the future. And I think what he did again in this draft was fill some voids and then also put guys on the squad that will be the heir apparents. The left tackle, Jason Spriggs, in the second round. Even the right tackle, Kyle Murphy from Stanford, deep in the draft. That's a guy who, in a year or two, could be our starting right tackle. Spriggs will most likely take over for Bakhtiari. You got a few other guys that I think are in position to play for this team within a year or two. And I think if you can put together a draft and have more than half those guys on the field playing a good amount of snaps in a year or two, then you win the draft in my book.
Yeah, so a lot was made last year of Eddie Lacy and his sort of, whether it was weight issues or just not being the Eddie Lacy Packers fans are kind of used to. Do you expect him to be back to form this year?
Yeah, I think, and I'm probably going to catch some slack for this, but Eddie frustrates me a lot because I see a ton of talent. I see a rare piece of talent, but I don't see the heart. I don't see the want to play like you almost need to have to play in this league. And, I think this year he'll have a great year because it's a contract year, and we all, we see guys come out of the woodwork all the time on their contract years. So, he took the necessary steps in the off season with the P90X, and he's going to run lights out because he wants to get paid. So for us, for the Packers, it's a great thing because I think he'll go hard and I think he'll have a great season. Going forward, I don't know if he continues to be a Packer, and we might just get one more great year out of him, and I hope as a team we take advantage of that.
So, last year, Aaron Rodgers, without Jordy Nelson, showed some confidence issues in the receivers. Obviously, the receivers also dropping balls didn't help either. What does Jordy Nelson bring now to the receiver core, and especially now with some of these receivers kind of stepping up last year, getting to have a whole season?
Yeah, it's an interesting thing as well because, for years I've always said, hey, it doesn't matter who we have at receiver. We got Aaron Rodgers. It's not a big deal. Well, I think that kind of showed itself a little bit last year. And no, I'm not denying that Aaron Rodgers is the best quarterback in the NFL. But when you don't have the guys around you that you have ultimate trust in or that you have worked countless times running timing routes, I think that it can affect your gameplay. I also think that it was not just necessarily the receivers, but we did have a lot of, injuries on the offensive line, a lot of rotation, which, not a lot of time for him to make those throws. The timing routes had to be extremely precise, and the guys that were out there running them weren't. I think a big load, the number one receiver type load, got put on Devontae Adams, and he wasn't ready for it. He had a terrible year. I hope he can bounce back. And same with Cobb. I think there was a lot of extra pressure put on, Cobb, and he's a fantastic receiver, but he's not a number one. He's not your big, strong guy who's going to go up. He's a fantastic slot receiver, probably the best in the game right now. But to put that much pressure on those guys was difficult. I think Jordy coming back this year will really open that up and allow the guys to kind of reassume their positions and reassume what they do best, along with Lacey running the ball better, a little bit more depth on the offensive line, and the addition of Jared Cook at tight end. I think we can go back to that form of Green Bay, and that firepower that they have will be resumed.
Defensively, what does Clay Matthews moving back to his more natural position do for that defense?
I think it just allows him to do what he does best. I mean, it's listen, when you're playing that kind of a position, with what he does, his skill set, he attacks, and he is great at attacking. So we put him back there. We take the leash off and we let him go. That's what he does best, and that's what we will benefit the most from. I think that the defense as a whole is young, but I think there's an exceptional amount of talent on that defense. A lot of depth was added through the draft, and a lot of our young draftees have actually really stepped up, so that's exciting. But I think it just allows him to do what he does best and kind of let that hair fly and go and get after the quarterback.
So as a Packers fan, how did you feel about that Hall of Fame game getting canceled?
That's a touchy subject for Green Bay people. I mean, this city, this state, and for Packer fans all around, we're pretty diehard. We're pretty, one-dimensional in a state like this where Green Bay football rules all. And so when you're waiting for this long to finally see some green and gold take the field and then for it to be pulled out from underneath you, it's kind of rough. But in the same breath, I don't want our guys to go out there and suffer injuries so that we can get our jollies and watch the game. So I think it was a smart idea. I think more than anything, the NFL and the Hall of Fame suffered a real blow to their ego and to what they have going on. But yeah, I mean, it was the fifth preseason game. A year ago, not even a year ago, when we found out we were playing the game, nobody wanted to. Everyone was like, well, now we have to play 5 preseason games, not 4. 4 is already too much. Well, we went back to 4, so I think it was a win for us.
Yeah, so at least they didn't have to play the game they didn't want to. But the game that they did play against Cleveland, did you get anything out of that for anybody?
I did. I think, again, the defense is young. There's a lot of young talent on that defense, and they've really stepped up quickly. In camp, a few guys, Kyler Fackrell, Martinez, the linebacker, he's pretty much been taking first rep snaps constantly. And then even a couple of second-year guys. Christian Ringo, we drafted last year. He really stepped up. He had a great game, actually, in Cleveland. Benequiz Brown, an undrafted free agent, led the team in tackles. And our first-round pick, Kenny Clark, has just been dominating in camp, better statistically in camp, since apparently they do keep statistics in camp. He has been the leader defensively. And another side one is Pete Mortell, the punter. He's actually born and raised in Green Bay. His dad was the current game clock operator. His grandfather did it for him for 30 years before that. So he's a hometown kid. He came in against Cleveland, punted 3 times, all of them inside the 20, at a 62 long, 44 average. Really great. It was exciting to see. Maste, had some troubles last year, and so I know that was kind of a storyline that we went into, and that was kind of exciting to see. But yeah, just again, young guys really making their steps to get to that point, and I think that youth and depth that we have on this defense is really going to be exciting to watch this year.
So, looking at the schedule the Packers have, obviously you're in a tough division with the Vikings and Lions, and well, the Bears are kind of the Bears. Looking at the schedule you have, and are you expecting to win this thing?
I wouldn't be a good fan if I didn't. I mean, I think every year that you have Aaron Rodgers at center, you kind of have to expect Super Bowl. But the division itself, it's impossible to really tell. It always is. I go into every single year mapping out what I expect the division to end like, and it usually never does. I think the Packers obviously are probably on the top of that. I know we didn't win the division last year, but I think it's safe to say we're the best in the division. Minnesota, hate to say it, but they don't look bad. They have a very good young defense. Adrian Peterson is Adrian Peterson. Receiving core, a little shaky, but they have a lot of good talent at key positions. It'll be interesting to see what Teddy Bridgewater does and if he continues to progress. Detroit, hard team to read. Sometimes they look great. Sometimes you wonder how they're even in the NFL. I think them losing Calvin Johnson really takes a big scare factor away, which sometimes that's great, and sometimes it's not. So much focus on one guy can open up things for other guys. So it'll be interesting to see what they can do. And Chicago has made a couple good moves. I think they have a good receiving core with Alshon Jeffrey and possibly Kevin White, but they still have Jay Cutler, and Jay Cutler has his issues against Green Bay, and I feel safe when the Packers take on Cutler.
And do you have a record you have in mind, like a best case scenario for them, and like the worst you think they do?
I'm gonna go with 12-4. I think there's a few losses that I could see happening. I could see a loss early, first game to Jacksonville. First games are a bad litmus test for a team, and sometimes teams can kind of get surprised out of the gate. And Jacksonville's putting together a great program down there, and it would be completely shocking if they were able to pull something off. I have another loss to the Giants, I think an underrated team going into the season. Another loss to Atlanta, who is always kind of a top-tier NFC team. Eventually, they're going to have to beat us, and I think maybe this year is the year they beat us. Regular season, but not postseason. And then a possible loss again to Seattle. I think those would be the 4 losses. And there's a chance that it could be more than that. It could end up being a 10-6 type season, but 10-6 isn't too bad. And if we make playoffs, the last time we won the Super Bowl, we went 10-6. So I think realistic expectations, playoffs, and getting to the Super Bowl is always realistic with us. A worst case scenario would be, if God forbid Aaron Rodgers was hurt and we didn't make the playoffs. I think then there would be severe panic in the state of Wisconsin.
Yeah, probably. I mean, you'd expect them to. I mean, it's just the Packers. It's the way they've been. You expect them to be at the top of that heap when the division is all said and done. So, that being said, 1-4, where do you think the division standings are?
I think at the end of the day, I think it's the Packers are on top, and Minnesota will be closely behind. and then we'll run with Chicago and Detroit down at the bottom, just because at this point I don't know really what Detroit brings to the table.
Fair enough. Is there a player that you're saying, okay, I watch them closely because I watch the Packers, but maybe the rest of the world doesn't know who he is, and he's gonna have a breakout year? Who do you think that is?
I've been going with either Mike Daniels or Micah Hyde. Mike Daniels kind of came on the map a little bit last year as a defensive lineman. Just a fierce competitor. Loves the game, plays it hard. I call him the Rhino. I think he's built like a rhino. He just attacks that same way. I think he goes from being a star on our team to being an all-star. And then another guy, Micah Hyde, I think will be the secret guy that comes and makes some big plays throughout the season. We have a great secondary, a young secondary, but a great secondary. And Micah kind of fits in as this versatile hybrid type defensive back. He can play safety, he can play slot, he can play corner, he returns punts. I think he has a breakout year. I think this is a year that if you don't know his name, you will know it by the end of the season.
All right, Fred. Thank you for helping us out here. You've answered all of our questions.
Well, thanks for having me, and go Pack, go.
All right. Well, that was Fred Thurston, Green Bay Packers writer for Last Word on Sports. That's the end of our interviews here, but I mean, he kind of brought it up. The defense still on the younger side. You're going to move Clay Matthews over to where he's best, and then you ride that offense as they've done for a while. You see the Packers sort of continuing this now?
Yeah, absolutely. Kind of brought it up with Jordy Nelson coming back, but to me, the big improvement is it looks like Eddie Lacy has remembered how to get back into shape. I think it was a lost year for Eddie Lacy last year, and it really hurt the team. So him back into the form that we were expecting 2 years ago is definitely going to be a huge improvement for these Packers, and they're going to be so much fun to watch.
This team has been, just a very well-rounded team in general for the last, I don't know how long. It just seems forever. McCarthy's done such a great job with them. But, looking at it, the offense has been pretty much the strong point, and that's not a bad thing. They've done a great job, in getting a cast of characters around Aaron Rodgers. The receiving core has been pretty darn good, and honestly, Aaron Rodgers has made the receiving core good at times. So saying all of that, with everything involved, I think you're going to get a repeat performance of kind of what you saw last year. I don't think they've changed drastically in any direction. I think that they made some changes that they needed to stay consistent. I think if they would have been the same exact team, they wouldn't be as good this year. They've made some changes to keep them right in place. So I feel pretty good about them right now. I think they're kind of my favorites at the moment in this division.
Yeah, I think they have to be the favorites just because they have all the intangibles you kind of want in the team. They don't have the dominant sort of defense they've had in the past. That's the thing that kind of worries me a little bit about them, is that, okay, you're not looking at this, oh, well, we could totally rely on them sort of feeling, but when you got Aaron Rodgers and you got Jordy Nelson with him there, I don't know how much of an excitement I am for Jared Cook. He dropped a lot of passes last year, but of course he wasn't having Aaron Rodgers throw to him, so that perhaps changes things. But, I think the Packers are going to wind up winning this thing again. So, well, not again. The Vikings technically won last year, but full standings, I guess we sort of already gave them here, but just for reference for everybody.
For me personally, I gave, I think, Chicago 7-9. I think that's a pretty good number. I think they're going to be a little bit more improved. I think that they'll steal some games away, maybe from the Vikings, Detroit. Heck, they may even steal one from the Packers. So I'm looking at them at 7-9. I got the Detroit coming in, and I think they're going to be 8-8. I think they're going to be able to do the same thing, kind of fight amongst themselves. I got the Vikings at 9-7, sneaking into the wild card somehow, some way. I think they're going to be the last wild card spot. I really do. I think they're going to sneak in. Mike Zimmer's a really good coach, and I think he can get them there. And I think got the Packers at 11-5. I think that they're a team that may lose an extra game or two here by default of that division, but besides that, I think they'll be the winners.
Yeah, I have Detroit probably 6-10, Chicago 8-8. I'll give Minnesota 9-7, and then that hunt for that last playoff spot, and then Green Bay kind of running away with it with a 12-4.
I'm gonna say 11-5 for Green Bay, 10-6 for the Vikings, 9-7 for Detroit, and 7-9 for the Bears. And well, that's gonna do it for us here on this edition of Football to the Max. Remember that next week we're doing our final division, the NFC East. So Gary and I will get to talk about our Cowboys, and of course, I know we have a ton of people for NFC East, so I'm not worried necessarily about not having people because we have backups to the backups to the backups. Yeah, I'll be glad to finally be done with talking about divisions and previewing and be talking about reviewing. And we will be reviewing. We'll be reviewing the preseason week 2 on the Monday NFL football edition. And, of course, we'll be doing the MAC, Mountain West, and Conference USA, which so Brandon, I think, is going to be the one doing all the interviews for those, or kind of helping us preview those, and then we'll just give our standings, and that'll be it for the college edition. And yeah, just of course, Randy, are y'all doing one a week until the season starts, or y'all going to be doing the 2 weeks?
No, we'll be going Monday and Thursdays. Monday we're going to be doing the quarterbacks, and then if time permitted, we'll throw in the defenses and kickers on that show. And then on Thursday, we're going to be doing the wide receivers, running backs, and tight ends, and get all of that stuff out there for you guys before you guys do your drafts the last few weeks.
Well, there you have it. Make sure you be listening to that Fantasy Football to the Max, wherever it is. On SoundCloud, on YouTube, on iTunes, on Stitcher. Just like, the WCO Network, you can listen to them on that feed as well. Or anywhere where their podcasts are available, and of course you can listen to the wrestling podcast. Lots of big wrestling weekend happening right now, of course, for that, as well as that UFC 202. But you got the NXT Takeover Brooklyn, the SummerSlam, ROH has a pay-per-view. Just lots of stuff going on there. So and then video games, Gamescom's going on. So Friday night looks like will be when we do the wrestling podcast. So, all right, until then, wow, I think the internet went out right when I was going to end the damn show. Just my luck. All right, so see you later, everybody.